Gonzalez, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Here are tonight's headlines.
More than 2,000 people have fled from a volcano eruption that has filled the air near the Philippine capital, the Taal Volcano, with toxic gas.
Two bodies were found after a huge landslide at a resort town in central Japan swept away homes on Saturday, following days of heavy rain, with around 20 people still missing.
And Ottawa prepared to send military aircraft and other help to evacuate towns and fight more than 100 wildfires in Western Canada, fueled by a record-smashing heat wave.
And a Boeing 737 cargo aircraft with 2 crew on board was forced to make an emergency landing on the water off Honolulu early Friday after the pilots reported engine trouble.
More than 2,000 people have fled from a volcano eruption that has filled the air near the Philippine capital with toxic gas, according to officials. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council has yet to record casualties directly related to Taal Volcano as of Friday night. Let's listen in.
Sa kabutihang palad, wala pa, no? Sana wala tayong experience na gano'n. Ang pinakita ng artificial person kanina ay status of evacuations lang. And yung mga evacuees ay tumuloy sa iba't ibang munisipyo, no? Hindi lang sa Agoncillo at sa Calauet. Ang volcano naman ay wala naman talaga nakatira na doon. Inhabitable yung island. Kung titignan natin yung current state niya, no? Walang vegetation. But we understand na merong mga pumunta doon, nagstay doon, yung mga caretakers ng peace fund malapit doon sa island. But ang report is wala na rin sila doon. Wala nang pinapayagan na any activity within the lake sa ngayon. And so yun ang latest figure presented kanina ng Aldrin C. Calabarzon ay 376 families or 1,495 persons ang nag-evacuate. Yun ay nanuluyan sa 12 evacuation centers. Kasi naalala ko doon sa presentation ng PBOX, mostly light to moderate, but merong mga areas na medyo mataas-taas din. So, titingnan naman ng PBOX yan. Siyempre, kapag malakas ng ulan, ay talagang ibababa niya yung mga deposits ng assets na nailuwa ng Taal noon pang unang pagputok niya last year. Baka hindi pa lahat yun bumaba. And nakita nga natin yung nakalipas na malakas na bagyo, I think Super Typhoon Rolly at saka Ulysses, na merong mga incident of mud flow dyan sa iba't ibang munisipyo ng Batangas. So,
Civil defense officials have warned that upwards of 317,000 people could be vulnerable to toxic gas emissions from the volcano under the current eruption's worst-case scenario. Taal is one of the most active volcanoes in a nation hit periodically by eruptions and earthquakes due to its location on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone of intense seismic activity. The last eruption there in January 2020 shot ash 15 kilometers or 9 miles high and spewed red-hot lava, crushing scores of homes, killing livestock, and sending over 135,000 people into shelters.
Now, travelers and tourism businesses in high-risk areas near the restive Taal Volcano are advised to evacuate as authorities place the volcano under alert level 3 due to magmatic unrest at its main crater. In a statement yesterday, the Department of Tourism, or DOT, said the health and safety of visitors and the locals remain as the top priority of the agency during this time. The DOT likewise encourages tourists to postpone any tourism activity and non-essential travel to high-risk towns of Agoncillo and Laurel, Batangas, until the FIVOX declares it safe to be in the vicinity, it said. Tourists who will need assistance may contact the DOT Calabarzon Regional Office through telephone number 049-508-0741 and email dot4a@tourism.gov.ph. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology on July 1st reported that Taal Volcano's main crater generated a 1-kilometer high, short-lived dark phreatomagmatic plume.
Meanwhile, 2 bodies were found after a huge landslide at a resort town in central Japan swept away homes on Saturday following days of heavy rain, with around 20 million or 20 people still missing. Take a look. A video posted on TikTok from the scene showed a huge slurry of mud and debris sliding slowly down a steep road and nearly engulfing a white car, which drove away before a faster and more devastating torrent arrived. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will meet ministers this afternoon to discuss the disaster and other rain-related damage. According to Japanese media, the local government has requested military assistance for a rescue mission, he added. The landslide occurred at around 10:30 local time, 10:30 in the morning, and several houses were swept away, an Atami city official said. More than 2,800 homes in the region were without power, according to the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO. Much of Japan is currently in its annual rainy season, which lasts several weeks and often causes floods and landslides, prompting local authorities to issue evacuation orders. Experts say climate change is intensifying the phenomenon because a warmer atmosphere holds more water, resulting in more intense rainfall. More than 200 people died as devastating floods inundated western Japan back in 2018, and last year, dozens more were killed as the coronavirus pandemic complicated relief efforts. Atami saw rainfall of 313 millimeters in just 48 hours to Saturday, higher than the usual monthly average of 242.5 millimeters in July, according to NHK.
In other news, Ottawa prepared Friday to send military aircraft and other help to evacuate towns and fight more than 100 wildfires in Western Canada, fueled by a record-smashing heat wave. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met Friday afternoon with an incident response group that included several ministers. He said he had already spoken with British Columbia's Premier, as well as local mayors and Indigenous chiefs in communities under threat. Take a look.
We are here as a federal government, as partners for whatever support people need. We're standing with the people of Lytton to rebuild, and we're continuing to work with the province to keep all British Columbians safe. Later today, I'll be convening the incident response group with ministers from my team to address the needs of communities in BC hit by wildfires and extreme weather, and to take a look at what we expect might be a very hot, very dry summer with many wildfires. As we do this, ministers will, of course, stay in close touch with all their provincial colleagues.
According to wildfire officials, at least 152 fires were active in British Columbia, 89 of them sparked in the last 2 days. Most were caused by lightning strikes. The fires were located north of the city of Kamloops, 350 kilometers northeast of Vancouver. Experts believe the heat wave, which has triggered extreme heat alerts in areas where millions of people live, is caused by global warming. The heat has killed more than 700 people in Canada and at least 16 in the United States.
Now, farther south, the U.S. states of Washington and Oregon have also been sweltering under record-high temperatures this week. Hundreds of firefighters scrambled on Friday to contain 3 wildfires in drought-hit Northern California that have scorched nearly 40,000 acres, including a popular tourist lake preparing to welcome hordes of visitors for the July 4th holiday weekend. Evacuation orders were in place along stretches of Shasta Lake, a camping and boating hotspot 160 kilometers south of the Oregon border, as soaring temperatures and high winds spur blazes at a relatively early stage in the region's fire season. Around 40 structures were destroyed, including at least half a dozen homes near the town of Lakehead, according to an AFP photographer. More than 500 lightning strikes were recorded in California in the last 24 hours, threatening to cause more fires. The lava fire was sparked by lightning last week, and more than 500 further lightning strikes were recorded in California over the past 24 hours, threatening to prompt new blazes. Dozens of fires are raging in western North America, from Canada to California, after the deadly heat wave that has largely begun to ease in recent days. More high temperatures are forecast in Northern California in the coming week.
A time-lapse video from a resident of Calgary, Canada, shows a pile of jelly beans liquefying as unprecedented temperature extremes hit Western Canada and the U.S. this week. Watch this.
The world is in a very dangerous period of COVID-19 pandemic, compounded by more transmissible variants like Delta, which is continuing to evolve and mutate. That, according to the World Health Organization. Let's listen in.
Listening as we're in a very dangerous period of this pandemic. In those countries with low vaccination coverage, terrible scenes of hospitals overflowing are again becoming the norm. But no country on earth is out of the woods yet. The Delta variant is dangerous and is continuing to evolve and mutate, which requires constant evaluation and careful adjustment of the public health response. Delta has been detected in at least 98 countries and is spreading quickly in countries with low and high vaccination coverage. This week, WHO hosted a 2-day summit with heads of state, heads of government, ministers, and civil society leaders from small island developing states, SIDS, which focused on building resilient health systems in the face of multiple threats. Climate crisis, the severe impact of the pandemic on lives and livelihoods, vaccine inequity, and the large burden of non-communicable diseases were discussed, and concrete outcomes developed on how together we can tackle them. On an almost day-to-day basis, we are now seeing the impact of the climate crisis. Record-breaking, scorching heat waves, catastrophic storms, and changing weather patterns are impacting food systems, disease, dispersion, and societies at large. The time for lofty words is over. There needs to be concerted action backed by financial resources to mitigate the consequences of climate change while we work to keep temperatures down and scale green innovations.
And we know too that one of the consequences of climate change is the fact that more pathogens will be released, and the likelihood of having future pandemics within a shorter period of time, maybe every several years, every decade, is likely. And that is one of the reasons to why we have to prioritize the issue of climate change in order to protect the planet and at the same time even to control or to reduce or eliminate, for that matter, the pandemics that may follow in the future.
The WHO chief further said that he had already urged leaders across the world to ensure that by this time next year, 70% of all people in every country are vaccinated. The world, he said, effectively end the acute phase of the pandemic. The WHO chief noted that 3 billion doses of vaccine had already been distributed, and of the vaccine doses given globally, fewer than 2% have been in poorer countries. Although rich countries, including Britain, the US, France, and Canada, have pledged to donate 1 billion vaccines, WHO estimates 11 billion doses are needed to immunize the world.
In other news, 2 more victims were found in the rubble of a partially collapsed apartment building in Florida on Friday. However, rescue efforts resumed late yesterday after a 14-hour pause due over concerns that parts of the building that remain standing could fall and endanger workers. Take a look.
And over the course of today's search, we did recover 2 additional victims. We now have 22 confirmed deaths, 188 people accounted for, and 126 unaccounted for. This afternoon, I signed an emergency order authorizing the demolition of the building in the interest of public health and safety, as soon as the engineers sign off on the next steps to begin the demolition process. So again, we cannot move swiftly to demolish this building. The building needs to be carefully evaluated. We have many engineers working together.
One of the teams that in Florida but came outside of Miami-Dade, they did have a few COVID individuals. So we do have our medical procedures in place. Unfortunately, this is, another challenge, but something that we've been dealing with for over the past year.
Also on Friday, a condo building in North Miami Beach, about 6 miles or 10 kilometers from Surfside, was ordered closed and evacuated after an inspection found unsafe structural and electrical conditions, according to local media. The city said the move was out of an abundance of caution as area authorities check high-rise condo buildings following the Surfside collapse. Officials also are keeping an eye on Hurricane Elsa, currently churning in the Caribbean amid fears the storm could affect the search if it brushes past Florida early next week.
Meanwhile, a Boeing 737 cargo aircraft with 2 crew on board was forced to make an emergency landing on the water off Honolulu early Friday after the pilots reported engine trouble, the Federal Aviation Administration said. And according to local media, 1 pilot is in critical condition and the other is in serious condition. Here's Jai Cunningham, a spokesperson for the Hawaii Department of Transportation.
I only tell you that the one pilot was airlifted by U.S. Coast Guard to a trauma center. The other one was just within the last few minutes transported via ambulance to a trauma center. It was a 737, a cargo airplane, and as you said, going from Honolulu to Kapalui, and again around 1:46 is when it happened. And just within the last few minutes, we saw one of those pilots being taken by ambulance to the hospital. So, but I can tell you, there were 2 people on board, 2 pilots that were on board. As you said, 1:42 is when the call came in that they were having problems with an engine. And then about 1:46, they called that they had a second problem with the other engine and went down at around that time. That's when the Hawaii Department of Transportation was able to scramble our rescue crews to head out. The report was about 2 to 4 miles south of Kalailoa is where the crash happened.
Transair Flight 810 had been expected to go from Honolulu to Kahului, the main airport on Maui, according to aviation data from FlightAware. The plane was attempting to return to Honolulu when they were forced to land the aircraft in the water at about 1:30 a.m. local time, an FAA spokeswoman said in a statement. And according to preliminary information, the U.S. Coast Guard rescued both crew members. The FAA and National Transportation Safety Board will investigate, according to the statement. Hawaii News Now, an online news outlet operated by the local CBS and NBC affiliates, said that one pilot, 58, was in intensive care in critical condition, while the second pilot, 50, was in serious condition with a head injury and multiple cuts. A source with the knowledge of the incident told AFP that the plane appears to be a 737 Classic that was likely at least 33 years old. Boeing's safety record was called into question after the fatal crashes of two 737 MAX passenger planes in 2018 and 2019, leaving nearly 350 people dead. The plane was grounded for 20 months after the crashes. Investigators said a main cause of both crashes was a faulty flight handling system known as the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to the news. Protesters in Kuhit, Myanmar, marked the birthday of junta leader Min Aung Hlaing Saturday by burning his portrait and staging mock funerals. The nation has experienced mass protests and a brutal military response since the February 1 coup, which ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Almost 890 civilians have died in a crackdown by the State Administration Council, as the junta calls itself, and almost 6,500 have been arrested, according to a local monitoring group. On Saturday, anti-coup demonstrators posted pictures on social media of a traditional noodle soup dish called mohinga, which is often served at funerals in Myanmar. In Mandalay, the country's second largest city, some activists burned pictures of the junta leader and set fire to fake coffins at mock funerals. Min Aung Hlaing turned 65 today, the age he would have been subject to mandatory retirement while he headed up the armed forces, as stipulated by the country's 2008 constitution. Some analysts believe that was a factor in his power grab because he had not been able to see a path to higher office with the help of the military-backed political party, which was routed in an election last year.
Meanwhile, journalist Nathan Maong turned to meditation when he was jailed for reporting on Myanmar's bloody coup. But even back home in sleepy Virginia, he cannot forget those left behind, including a colleague still at the mercy of their jailers. In March, as the junta moved to crush mass pro-democracy protests on Myanmar streets, about 45 soldiers arrived at his office in the commercial capital Yangon. He told this in an interview with AFP. And as the squad battered their way through the gate and a locked door, Mang was frantically sending messages to friends telling them he was about to be arrested. And the rest, let's listen in.
We stay in the newsroom, make sure that we not get killed. That's all we can hope for. So 10 minutes later, they broke our fence doors, and there's a door by door. We make sure we lock them, step by step. And 10 minutes later, they showed up, they broke the door, and they pointed their gun to our house. And I said, please don't shoot, please don't shoot. For 3.5 days, without sleeping, they didn't give no water for 2 days. And they interrogate me every 2 hours, rotating. 2 guys, maybe 3 guys shows up every 2 hours, morning, day and night. They beat me, they kick my cheek, they hit my eardrum like this for several times. They beat my shoulder and my leg. Thought, I will get killed any minute, any time. So I just keep meditating myself. I could survive. After I got water, I thought, okay, I'm gonna be alive. I've been in April and May. I have a phone conversation with the consul from U.S. Embassy, and they explain me the U.S. government is working very hard for my freedom. So I believe the pressure of the United States, government and the embassy, the ambassador, trying very hard for the best, as good as they can. I believe that is why I released. But I'm committed to do my job as a journalist. I would do for Burma, I would do for my fellow journalists. I feel guilty to be in the United States. I never enjoy my freedom. So my body is here, my mind is always with my friends Hanta and other journalists and other inmates. Sometimes I cannot describe the brutality and nightmare what I experience.
In other news, U.S. President Joe Biden says there is no plan for the imminent withdrawal of the final U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Take a look.
Could you talk to us about Afghanistan? Is the drawdown going to be done in the next few days?
No. No, we're on track exactly as to where we expect it to be. But I wanted to make sure there was enough, quote, running room that we wouldn't be able to do it all to September. There'll still be some forces left, but it's a rational drawdown with our allies, and it's making, so there's nothing unusual about it.
Biden has set a deadline of September 11 for the final pull-out of the few remaining troops following 20 years of war. Also, the Biden administration still plans to provide the Afghan government more than $3 billion in security assistance, just with not as much oversight in the country to prevent corruption.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters ahead of the U.S. withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan that President Biden feels the war in Afghanistan is not one that can be won militarily. Take a look.
It's jobs day. What's the next step? First, I would say that the president has long felt, as many Americans have, and many leaders have, that the war in Afghanistan was not one that could be won militarily. That's why we have supported diplomatic negotiations and discussions, and we will continue to be engaged in those moving forward. And again, we'll continue to have a diplomatic presence on the ground, even after we bring our men and women home. As Commander-in-Chief, you have to make decisions about how to protect the men and women serving.
Media reports say the Pentagon will probably retain about 600 U.S. troops in Afghanistan to guard the vast U.S. diplomatic compound in Kabul. Residents of Bagram said security will only deteriorate with the exit of foreign forces. U.S. intelligence services, military commanders, and members of Congress are all warning that the Afghan government won't be able to stand up to the Taliban without the backing of American firepower. The Taliban are already moving rapidly to take over districts in the northern parts of Afghanistan, leading U.S. military commanders to raise the prospect of a civil war once U.S. troops are gone.
Back here in the Philippines, where the country's COVID-19 situation remains fragile despite a low-risk classification, according to the Department of Health, or DOH. The low-risk classification is based on parameters that the country can manage its cases, but it doesn't mean that the public should be complacent in following health protocols. Let's listen in.
The national picture, yes, will show us that nasa low risk tayo based on the 2-week growth rate and the average daily attack rate. Pero pag tinignan ho natin ang bawat reyon sa ating bansa, makikita ho natin na may mga reyon talaga ngayon na may mga pagtaas ng kaso. So this low risk classification should not really be advertised, or hindi dapat ma-encourage ang ating mga kababayan para maging complacent tayo. Ibig sabihin lang po na ma-manage natin ang ating mga kaso, ngunit meron mga angking pagtaas sa ibang lugar, kaya kailangan po patuloy pa rin po ang ating pag-iingat.
Given a day before, kasi po kapag nagbigay po ng dose ang national government, agad rin po itong ibinibigay. So kung wari po, katulad nung nakaraan, kahapon po o nung isang araw ay nagbigay po ng ilang dosage ang national government, agad sumunod na araw po ay agad naman po itong ibinigay sa mga mamamayan.
In the National Capital Region, or NCR, Verheire said the decline in infections is slightly slowing down, but cases outside can affect the region because its borders are very porous. Currently under closely monitoring are cases in the Visayas and Regions 11, 12, Caraga, and Bangsamoro in Mindanao. The DOH is also observing the situation in some parts of Luzon, particularly Lucena City in Calabar Zone, Ilocos Region, Cagayan Valley, and the Cordillera Administrative Region, where there is a high health care utilization rate.
Meanwhile, Australia announced a dramatic cut in the number of people who will be allowed to enter the country on Friday as it struggles to contain coronavirus clusters that plunged major cities into lockdown. Again, let's listen in.
Overnight, as predicted, we had 35 cases of community transmission. Pleasingly, 9 of those were infectious during the time in the community that we understand out of that 35. So whilst, as predicted, the number of cases are going up, we're seeing a greater proportion of those cases in isolation, which is exactly what we want to see. So the green shoots are there. The green shoots of the lockdown doing what we hoped it would are certainly there. We haven't seen a huge surge in cases, and we certainly feel through our contact tracing that we're not at this stage missing any chains of community transmission, but it is really up to us. It was exactly a week ago that we as a government took the difficult decision to ask many residents in New South Wales to stay at home. And again, today we do that. Please, let's not give up now when we're doing well. The green shoots are there of demonstrating the lockdown is having the desired effect.
When you're in a war, you don't win it with wacko views. And unfortunately, we're seeing that with some people who think that it's okay not to wear masks. My strong message to the community is we will only win this war against the virus if people wear masks and follow all of the other instructions that we understand will keep us safe. We owe this to ourselves. We owe this to the community more broadly. We owe this to our families. wear a mask and don't get caught up in the wacko views that some are expressing.
With almost half of the nation's population under stay-at-home orders, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said quotas for overseas arrivals would be cut by around 50% to help prevent further outbreaks. Under the current zero-COVID strategy, just 6,000 people are allowed to enter Australia on overseas commercial flights each week, and arrivals must undergo 2 weeks of hotel quarantine. That quota will be cut to around 3,000 by the middle of July. According to Morrison, he indicated this, although the government will at the same time set up its private repatriation flights. Sydney and Brisbane, home to around 10 million people, combined remain in lockdown in an effort to suppress outbreaks that delivered 27 new local cases last Thursday. And although shutdowns are being lifted in Alice Springs, Darwin, Perth, and Queensland's Gold Coast, the clusters continue to grow, particularly in Sydney. There, a Bondi cluster has infected 168 people since being discovered on June 16.
Russia on Saturday reported 697 COVID-19 deaths in the previous 24 hours. The fifth straight day the country has set a new record as it battles the surging Delta variant. It also recorded 24,439 new coronavirus cases, the highest figure since the middle of January when Russia was emerging from its second wave of the pandemic. Moscow, the biggest virus hotspot nationwide, recorded 116 deaths, close to the city's pandemic record seen earlier this week. Russia's coronavirus outbreak has been surging since mid-June against a background of reluctance among many to get vaccinated and suspicion of homegrown shots. So far, just 16% of Russia's 146 million people have been jabbed. Moscow on Thursday began offering third doses to those who have received their second shots more than 6 months ago to boost their defense against new variants. President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday urged Russians to listen to experts rather than rumors about the virus and vaccines, although he also said he was opposed to making inoculations compulsory nationwide. The government has also ruled out a nationwide lockdown, even as it has acknowledged that it will miss a target of vaccinating 60% of people by August. So far, 137,262 people have died among 5.5 million infected in Russia, according to official figures. Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Broadcast journalist Wang de la Fuente returns on Philippine television and radio to deliver top stories and engage with the country's policymakers, shapers, and movers. Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Wang de la Fuente sa Bali Talakayan.
Ako si Wang de la Fuente at itong Bali Talakayan will live in interesting times.
E-commerce Amazon is to expand its air cargo hub in Tampa. The expansion is driven by market demands in e-commerce and Amazon's growing stake in the marketplace with warehouses and distribution centers across Tampa Bay. Here's Melissa Allen for the report.
As the world of e-commerce continues to experience exceptional growth, Amazon is planning to drastically increase its air freight operations in Central Florida.
Nestled in between Tampa and Orlando sits the city of Lakeland, which according to the latest U.S. Census data, is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country, and in 2020 ranked second fastest in the nation. In 2019, Amazon signed a ground lease agreement with the city of Lakeland, and their subsidiary Amazon Air began air cargo operations from the Lakeland Linder International Airport last summer. The airport has a total land area of almost 1,800 acres, and its footprint is bigger than all 4 of the Walt Disney World theme parks put together. Amazon plans to expand its presence at the Lakeland-based airport, and according to the Tampa Bay Business Journal, the online retail giant hopes to double the number of flights per day over the next 6 years.
Reporting from Lakeland, Florida, Melissa Allen, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
A USIT company urged customers to shut down their servers Friday after cyber attackers smuggled ransomware onto its network platform. Cybersecurity firm Huntress Labs had earlier said in a Reddit forum that it was working with partners targeted in the attack and that some 200 businesses have been encrypted. Ransomware attacks typically involve locking away data in systems using encryption, making companies to regain access. Kaseya describes itself as a leading provider of IT and security management services to small and medium-sized businesses. VSA, the company's flagship offering, is designed to let companies manage networks of computers and printers from a single point. According to the New Zealand government's computer emergency response team, the attackers were from a hacking group known as Revil. Revil was also, according to the FBI, behind last month's attack on JBS, one of the world's biggest meat processors, which ended with a Brazil-based company paying Bitcoin worth $11 million to the hackers. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency put out word that it was taking action to understand and address the recent supply chain ransomware attack against Kaseya, VSA, and the service providers using its software.
The UN Security Council this week held its first formal public meeting on cybersecurity, addressing the growing threat of hacks to countries' key infrastructure, an issue U.S. President Joe Biden recently raised with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Several Security Council members acknowledged the grave dangers posed by cybercrime, notably ransomware attacks on key installations and companies. Take a look.
As advances in digital technologies continue to revolutionize human life, we must remain vigilant in our understanding of malicious use of such technologies that could imperil the security of future generations. While the digital space has come to underpin almost every aspect of our daily lives, the scale and pervasiveness of ICT insecurity is also now recognized as a major concern. The political and technical difficulty of attributing and assigning responsibility for ICT attacks could result in significant consequences, including in unintended arms responses and escalation.
We all share this responsibility. As President Biden recently noted, and I quote, "Countries need to take action against criminals who conduct ransomware activities on their territory." So let me be clear. When a state is notified of harmful activities emanating from its own territory, it must take reasonable steps to address it. Given the transnational nature of cyberspace, this cooperation is essential.
Aircar, a dual-mode car aircraft vehicle, has fulfilled a key development milestone in a 35-minute flight from the international airport in Nitra to the international airport in Bratislava. According to CBS News, Aircar, described as a dual-mode car aircraft vehicle in a news release, traveled from the international airport in Nitra to the airport in Bratislava on Monday. According to the company that created it, Klein Vision, the flying car completed its 142nd successful landing, and the flight marked a key development milestone. With a click of a button, the aircraft turned into a sports car in under 3 minutes, and it was driven by its inventor, Professor Stefan Klein. After exiting the Aircar following the test, Klein declared the flight has started a new era of dual transportation vehicles. Now, Dr. Branko Sar, a Boeing company senior technical fellow, commended Klein for the development of user-friendly flying cars.
And our showbiz correspondent from LA, MJ Racario, previously joined a talk with Steve McQueen, an Oscar-winning director, and discussed with him his latest series on Amazon called Small Axe. Let's take a look.
Hi everyone, MJ Racario here. Here is a showbiz update. Oscar winner director Steve McQueen previously joined him in a virtual conversation presented by American Cinematheque. And how did it all started for him? And why this kind of story? He talked about the small axe. Let's listen in.
I was always interested in moving images. I was very lucky enough to get a Super 8 camera at art school. And the advice that I got was just to look through the lens, keep on looking through the lens. And in some ways, also, it was a sort of evolution because I could always draw, and then I was a painter, and then movie camera. So I knew I didn't want to tell because I was thinking I didn't want to tell fictional stories. I want to tell true stories because when in the research, it was just so interesting. I think I turned 50 last year, and it was kind of interesting because it wasn't a case of getting older. It was actually a case of having a superpower because you've seen so much in those years, and you get an understanding a little bit of how you can handle things, or at least a maturity at least, or how to sort of see things.
A demonstration took place against the police, which degenerated into totally inexcusable violence.
Based on a true story, Small Axe celebrates little-known stories of Black pride and resilience, like the Mangrove March. Learn more about what happens when even ordinary people stand up to police brutality and racial injustice to achieve something transformative with Academy Award winner Steve McQueen's latest.
It's not an isolated event, but a sustained campaign against Black people. And today we are saying enough is enough.
If you are the big tree, we are the small axe, sharpened to cut you down.
That is it for our showbiz update. MJ Rakati here. Until next time, we live in interesting times.
Thanks, MJ.
I'm so jealous of MJ.
Why?
The Hollywood stars and celebrities that he gets to interview. Thank you so much, MJ. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again on Monday.
And before we go, at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for, especially now. We would like to greet our chairman, Brother TJ Orosa. A very happy birthday po.
Happy birthday!
And at the end of the day, as I always say,
we live in interesting times.